right. Hi, everyone. My name is Monal Chokshi. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Martin. And I started the UX research team at Lyft and have been leading it for the last 4.5 years. How many of you know Lyft or have heard of Lyft? Okay. Well, many of you, but not all of you. So Lyft is a transportation company specializing in ride sharing and might be similar to another company you've heard of. That which we will not name. Just kidding. Very similar to Uber. And today I'm going to be talking about how to succeed as a UX research manager by utilizing your skills, capitalizing on them as a researcher. So, since I'm going to be finishing off this day of research, let's finish strong and fun. So I'm going to ask for your help here. Every time you see this emoji on my slides, I want you to raise your hands in the air like that. So let's all try it. Awesome. Okay, so ready to get started now. And in true researcher fashion, I'm going to ask you some questions. All right, so how many of you are researchers looking to move into management? None of you. Oh, a couple of you. Okay, all right. And how many of you are already managing a research team or a team in general? Okay. A lot more of you. Great. Well, of you managers, how many of you have done research in the past or are still doing it today? Okay. Most of you. So as you can see, most of us who are managers of research teams or researchers have started or have done research ourselves. And then one day, oh, yes, that's what we want. One day, we went from individual contributor, researcher, to a manager. And for a lot of us, this happened overnight. And so when it happened for me, I was excited, but then I was also feeling like this. Because I hadn't managed before, I was excited to. A little bit of history. I started my career during the .com era as a designer and researcher, kind of a UX generalist. And I worked at various startups in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then when I was a researcher at Yahoo in the 2000s, I got really curious about management. But unfortunately, Yahoo started eliminating management positions because they're starting to struggle as a company. Well, luckily, I had worked closely with a design director at Yahoo who'd moved on to Intuit. And she knew a lot about me and my potential, and she decided to take the leap to hire me on as a manager, which is great news for me. And then I continued on to SoundCloud with that managerial research experience under my belt. And I went to SoundCloud in Berlin to start the research team there. And finally, I went back to San Francisco after a few years to establish the UX research discipline at Lyft. And over the last 4.5 years, I'd had the opportunity to grow the research team from just myself to over 25. So, making a move from a researcher to a research manager can feel super intimidating. And the truth is that becoming a manager does require learning a new set of skills. Managing people and processes and politics can be really difficult at times. But through my years of experience, I've learned that we, as UX researchers, do make great managers. And I'm going to tell you how we're better set up for success in management than many others. Awesome. All right. All right, so in this talk, I'm going to go over what makes for a good manager, 3 parts to managing, and why I think UX researchers make great managers. And my hope is that together we can continue to successfully grow this discipline of UX research onward and upwards. All right, so let's start by asking, what makes for a good manager? So this is Julie Zhu, and she was the VP of product design at Facebook. And earlier this year, she published a book called The Making of a Manager. This is a great read for anyone who is a manager, or especially first-time managers, people looking to become a manager. And in it, she tells us a little bit about management, of course. But here, she defines managers. So she says, managers share a common purpose, helping a group of people achieve a common goal. A great manager's team will consistently achieve great outcomes. However, there's a difference between management and leadership. So the Harvard Business Review talks about that difference. And they say management consists of controlling a group or a set of entities to accomplish a goal. Very similar to what Julie had to say. But leadership refers to an individual's ability to influence, motivate, and enable others to contribute towards organizational success. More simply put, management is a role, and leadership is how you show up. And this is how Mia Bloom, who's a design leadership coach, puts it. So we can think about management and leadership in a Venn diagram. On the left, you see management, and we might describe a manager as someone who organizes, delegates, and plans. And on the right, we see leadership. And we might describe a leader as someone who influences, motivates, and excites. So the bottom line here is that we can be leaders without managing people. But the best managers are also strong leaders. So in this talk, I'm going to be focusing on the sweet spot that's right here in the middle. All right. So let's move on to the 3 parts of managing and how our research skills can help us be successful with each. So I think of management in 3 parts. The first is managing down, and this includes traditional management tasks that you might think of when you think of management, like managing our teams and managing resources. However, as a leader, it's also important to manage across and up. Managing across really has to do with building relationships and garnering influence with cross-functional partners and stakeholders. Managing up has to do with elevating and advocating the work of your team and demonstrating influence with it. So let's dive into each one of these parts. First, managing down. So Julie Zhu, in her book, talks about management falling distinctly into 3 neat buckets, and that's purpose, people, and process. However, I'm going to add one more to that, and that's the work. All right, so first for purpose. How many of you know your company's vision or mission statement? All right, about half of you. And how many of you have a mission or vision statement for your research team? Okay, fewer of you. So as leaders, setting a shared vision and mission statement is a great way to align our teams. At Lyft, we started with our company's mission statement, which is to improve people's lives with the world's best transportation. And as a UX research team, we're really focused on this part of the statement, which is improving people's lives. With this as a starting point, we've developed our own mission statement with input from our stakeholders. So this is where we landed. We improve people's lives by driving strategic, user-centered decisions for our products and company. Through our insights, we align stakeholders and build company-wide user empathy. This is our North Star, and it's what drives us as individuals and as a team. So overall, when it comes to purpose and setting a vision for our teams, how do we do as UX researchers turned managers? We've got this. All right, so as managers, we can really use our research skills to successfully fulfill the purpose bucket of management. For example, we can use our interviewing skills by interviewing stakeholders to really understand the purpose of our team and our discipline within that company, at least from their perspective. And then we can use that as input into creating a shared vision with the rest of the team and using our brainstorming and facilitation skills that we use so often when moderating workshops and other research activities. Great, so check for purpose. Moving on to people. Managing down also includes managing people, which includes giving feedback, developing talent, and building culture. So when it comes to giving feedback, what do we always say about research? Don't wait. Do it early and do it often. And the same goes for giving feedback, both positive and constructive feedback. and ensure that your feedback is as straightforward and simple as possible, or clear as possible, but also very specific. Giving feedback also relates to developing talent. We really want to be able to coach and mentor each of our directs. And with that, it's important to really understand your team's long-term and short-term goals. That way you can really look for opportunities that align to their interests and help them succeed at accomplishing those goals. So at Lyft, for example, several UX researchers were eager to figure out how to up-level the quality of their insights. So what we did was we brought in an expert to do a 2-day training with the team, and it was focused specifically on developing frameworks for our insights. So here you can see some folks engaged in that learning. Finally, managers must build a culture, a healthy team culture, which relies on trust and psychological safety. So psychological safety is defined as the belief that you won't be punished if you make a mistake. And the Harvard Business Review talks about psychological safety in this article. And they say, psychological safety allows for moderate risk-taking, speaking your mind, creativity, and sticking your neck out without fear of having it cut off. And these are just the types of behavior that lead to market breakthroughs. In fact, Google did a 2-year study on team performance, and that revealed that psychological safety was the one thing that the highest performing teams had in common. So when looking to build our team culture at Lyft, I only needed to observe what the team was already doing naturally and then provide more opportunities around that. So as you see in this photo here, I'd often spot 2 researchers kind of huddled on the side in a corner, helping one another out on projects, offering advice, and giving feedback. And after doing a little bit more observation and doing research with some of the other folks on the team, I learned 2 things about the team. One, they're very supportive of one another, and they're eager to help each other out. And 2, they're really excited to learn new skills. So as a result, we established 2 team programs. The first we call peer mentoring. And every other Friday, we have an hour where a researcher can sign up for a slot to teach a new skill or method to the rest of the team. The second program is called Research Jams. And we've divided the team up, which we kind of switched groups every half or so. And within that group, a researcher can bring a problem or something they're working on and get feedback and brainstorm with the other researchers. So these 2 programs have really helped build more psychological safety into the culture, and it really just helps promote what already existed on the team. All right, so when it comes to managing people, as UX researchers, we got this. We make great people managers. So as researchers, we're well known for our user empathy when doing research. And this translates really nicely to managing teams and leading teams. We know how to ask good questions. We know how to listen actively. And a lot of these communication skills are important for giving feedback and also developing talent. And finally, as researchers, we are also skilled observers of users and social dynamics in the real world. So we can use these same observation skills to understand our team members and what drives them in order to help build a strong culture of trust. All right, so check on the people part. All right, moving to process. This includes planning and resourcing, creating processes, and removing blockers. So those of you who are managers, you know that much of our time goes into planning and resourcing. And along with that comes figuring out how to best hire and build a team to get the work done. So here's a photo of me with one of our designers. This is when I was the lone researcher at Lyft 4 years ago, and we're doing research in a car. And as Lyft's first researcher, I had the opportunity to build our UX research team from scratch. So since then, we've grown and we are continuing to grow. Early on, we were a team of just a small team, and I really aimed to build a team of what I called full stack researchers. And these are folks who can kind of do any research method, or they were kind of a UX research generalist. But since then, the company has built out new lines of business, like autonomous vehicles and bikes and scooters. And those lines of business require specialized skills to be able to accomplish the research needs that they have. So, for example, we've hired human factors and ergonomics specialists to work on our bikes and scooters division. We found researchers with service design experience to focus on our operations-heavy areas, such as our Express Drive program, which allows Lyft drivers to rent vehicles through Lyft. And we found researchers with mixed method skill sets in order to work on our growth and marketplace teams. So overall, we've looked to grow a team that's diverse across the board with different skill sets, levels of seniority, and backgrounds. I also considered how to grow the team given our larger company culture. At Lyft, there's a strong culture of community and collaboration. So when planning resources for the teams, I look to embed each researcher within a product team in order to provide them with a stronger sense of ownership and involvement. So an embedded team model really allows each researcher to ensure for research where it's needed across the entire product lifecycle. It also allows them to be the go-to expert for that product and its users. And finally, it gives them a chance to have a seat and a voice at the table so that they are part owner and teammate with that product team. Great. So the next part of the process bucket is creating processes. And going back to Julie, she talks about creating processes in her book. As a manager, part of your job is the cultivation of playbooks. How to run a team meeting, how to close a new hire, and how to complete a project on time and on budget. These are just a few of the processes that good managers are expected to put in place for teams to run smoothly. And hopefully we have a research ops person too who can help with this. And finally, removing blockers. Our teams rely on us to clear the path for them in order to get work done. And many managers talk about being a shit umbrella. So we're relied upon to protect our teams from obstacles that may get in their way. So how do we do when managing process? You guessed right, we got this. All right, for planning and resourcing, we can determine how to best staff our team and projects by conducting internal research with our stakeholders. And when it comes to creating processes, we're naturals. And if you think about all the research studies that you do, you have running a research study end-to-end requires a large amount of planning, organization, collaboration with stakeholders, and participants too. And all the data. You have to be well organized to do that and create your own processes to get the work done. When it comes to removing blockers, we can use the empathy and communication skills that we have as good researchers to be able to soothe and talk to our stakeholders and help unblock our team. All right, so the final area of managing down is the work. And that is all about empowering your team and setting clear expectations. So when it comes to trusting and empowering others, Forbes says, leadership requires you to rely on someone else. You have to trust their instincts and trust yourself to put your faith in someone who isn't you. And that's hard for a lot of managers. And it's necessary, though, because you can't do all the work yourself anymore, and nor do you want to be micromanaging your team. And along with that, it's important to set clear expectations around the work in order to set your team up for success. So, related to that, I have another question for you all. How many of you have reported to someone who was never a researcher or didn't fully understand what you did when you were doing research? Okay, I see a majority of hands going up here. So same was the case with me. That's been the case for almost every role I've had. But I'm really excited to see that as a discipline, we've grown to the point where it's more common now to see UX researchers being managed by UX researchers being managed by research managers, rather than someone from a different discipline. So as managers who are researchers ourselves, we're much better suited to set reasonable expectations, among other things. So here's a Lyft research team member and me reviewing findings from a large study she conducted. And so here we can really empathize with the needs and challenges of the work, unlike other people who don't do research. We have a good sense of what can be delegated and where to best empower our teams. And most of all, we know what it means to set clear expectations about the work, not just with our team members, but also with partners. For example, to help them understand the proper timeframes that are required to do quality research and get quality insights. So overall, we make great managers, and especially we're uniquely positioned to manage UX researchers better than anyone else. All right, so when it comes to managing the work, we're all over this. The strongest attribute that we can draw upon from our UX research toolkit here is our empathy for the work. Additionally, our data synthesis skills will really help us cull down all the information we get as managers and then be able to use our communication skills to tell our teams exactly the right amount of information and so that they can flourish in their jobs. All right, so we do a lot when managing down, and it's clear that this takes up a large portion of our time. But given our strong sense of empathy for both the work and the people, we're set up for success. All right, let's move on to managing across. So simply put, managing across is all about building relationships and garnering influence with your cross-functional stakeholders and partners. And these are leadership skills. You do not need to be a people manager in order to do this well. And once you get these relationships in place across the company, you'll be able to do more together. So when I first started at Lyft, I had heard of plans for more research and insights teams to be built across the company. So with all of these new research teams, I wanted to ensure that we weren't siloed. So I started what is now known as our Research and Insights Group. The strong relationships we've formed have allowed us to work together whenever possible and not duplicate efforts. And we've grown a lot, and we still meet regularly today to share our work and insights. We also collaborate to try and triangulate our data, aiming to provide the company with what I call a single voice of truth. And having this unified perspective will really give us a stronger and a more influential voice in order to help drive business decisions. All right, so when it comes to managing across, we've got this, we're ready. As researchers, we're experts at building relationships. I mean, if you think about it, every single time you start a research study and a session with a user, you have mere minutes to be able to build a trusting relationship and that rapport, so they'll open up to you. And luckily, as managers, we have a lot more time to do that. We're also constantly utilizing our empathy, communication, and collaboration skills to build relationships with our research stakeholders throughout the research process. And now as UX research leaders and managers, we just have to continue to do more of the same type of work. The main difference this time is that we're utilizing the work of our team and not the work that we're doing. All right, finally, let's talk about managing up. Again, this is centered around leadership, and it has to do with managing our relationship with our boss and also other leaders and executives. So this often means elevating and advocating the insights uncovered by our team and demonstrating the influence that it's had for the business. So in the Harvard Business Review article, What Everyone Should Know About Managing Up, they say that the most important skill to master is figuring out how to be a genuine source of help, creating value for your boss and your company. Some of the key tasks in managing up are building relationships with our boss and company leaders, driving the visibility of our team's work and promoting it, demonstrating the influence it's had, driving strategic business decisions at the executive level, and educating leaders about user experience research and evangelizing us overall. Evangelizing is especially important for companies where the value of what we do is not yet realized or understood. So, the more we can point to business successes as a result of our research, the better we'll do at growing our teams and thus helping create a more user-centered organization. So at Lyft, in order to demonstrate how we've influenced the business, we track the impact of every study we do. Specifically, we capture the decisions that were made as a result of our research, and then what business metrics changed as a result of those decisions. And we take as many opportunities as we can to drive visibility and evangelize our work. So for example, this is us presenting at a tech all-hands meeting at Lyft. All right, so when it comes to managing up as UX researchers, you know the answer. We've got this. We use many of the same qualities here as we do for managing across. And the key skill to master in managing up is figuring out how to best create value, which we can accomplish by doing internal research. We can also use the presentation and storytelling skills that we've learned as researchers to build interest and demonstrate the value the work has had. All right, so now we've reviewed 3 parts to managing: down, across, and up, and what it means to do them well. And I've shared how we can utilize our skills as researchers to help us succeed as people managers and leaders for our company. And these skills, all of these skills can be used across all areas. I've just kind of highlighted a few here. But we should remember overall that it's important not just to focus on the managing down, but also the managing across and up too. All right, final section, why we make great managers. All right. How many of you have listened to Steve Portugal's podcast, Dollars to Donuts? Anyone? All right, not many hands up. So I want to point it out to you because this is a really great resource for people who are looking to move into management or who are already managers, because Steve interviews UX research managers exclusively. So in fact, I had the pleasure of being interviewed by Steve a few years ago. And in that episode, I mentioned 3 qualities that I look for in research candidates. The first is empathy, analytical thinking, and organizational skills or project management skills. And Steve noted in the interview that these 3 are really interesting because they kind of are the span, go across the span of doing a research study. But I've thought about it, and I want to add one more to this list. And that's communication and collaboration skills. And I'm going to tell you why. At Lyft, I tell my team that doing good research and uncovering deep insights is only half of their job. The key attributes in order to do that are empathy, analytical thinking, and organizational skills. But the other half of their jobs is to influence and drive decisions across the company. And in order to do that, you need strong communication and collaboration skills. So, now looking at this list of 4 UX researcher attributes, we can already see several things that make for strengths as managers as well. The final area I want to point out is coming from a study that was done by McKinsey in 2015. They found that there are just 4 kinds of behavior that account for 89% of all leadership effectiveness. And those are, first, being supportive. So it was described as being able to understand and sense how other people feel, and by showing a sincere interest in those around them, they build trust. This sounds a lot like empathy to me. Another behavior was to solve problems effectively. They say that problem solving, when information is gathered, analyzed, and considered, precedes decision making. And being able to make decisions is a key quality of being a good manager. We need analytical thinking skills in order to solve problems effectively. Another behavior of the leadership effectiveness is to operate with strong results orientation. So McKinsey says that leaders with this trait, quote, emphasize the importance of efficiency and productivity and prioritize the highest value work. It takes strong organizational skills to operate with strong results orientation. And the final of the 4 behaviors is to seek different perspectives. McKinsey describes this in part as to encourage employees to contribute ideas and give appropriate weight to stakeholder concerns. Communication and collaboration are really required to seek out and act upon different perspectives. So based on this exercise, we can see that we have some inherent traits for being strong leaders in addition to being great managers. So just to wrap up, if you only remember one thing from this talk, remember that we've got this. UX researchers make great managers. And if you're not already actively using your research skills, dig back into that researcher toolkit and utilize them to manage up, down, and across. But also take advantage of management and leadership trainings, opportunities for feedback, and everyone in this room to keep learning. I want to thank Tech Circus and our sponsors for holding a research-specific day, which is starting to become more known in the industry at UX Live, and for bringing us together as we collaborate in growing the UX research discipline. And also a big thank you to these folks who provide me with their thoughts for this talk. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Monal. It's really great to see that that elevated, and it's been a conversation that we've had at work as well. We have multidisciplinary teams, and so we've been having researchers going, I'd like to lead multidisciplinary teams. Have you seen researchers elevate to lead in that way, not just leading research teams?
Absolutely. I think where I am in San Francisco, there have been more and more research-specific teams, but I think there have been definitely lots of cases where researchers have risen up and have managed teams that are multidisciplinary as well.
I think your talk very clearly made that point, which is great, wonderful. Yes, drinks are starting, but please, I think some of you may have some questions, and we do have time if you have some patience for that, to ask some questions of Monal. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask? We'll just take 3 or 4 minutes. There's at least one there. That's great. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I want to learn a bit more about, earlier in the talk you explained when Lyft had new lines of businesses adding and you had to recruit and source different type of skills. How did you come to dissect what are the required specific skills for those new lines of business, and then how did you map and match those?
Yeah, absolutely, great question. So for example, for bikes and scooters, a lot of the questions that we had a researcher there, which is great. They asked for a researcher right when they started building out this division. So it's like, okay, we won. They won us from the beginning, so that was a huge win for us. But that researcher was not skilled in human factors and ergonomics, and he realized that, hey, the kinds of questions that the team are asking are not ones that I am suitably, equipped to answer. So from there, it's like, okay, well, who can answer that kind of question, and how can we get someone in to answer those? So obviously for like bikes and scooters, it's like, how are we designing some new equipment, the kinds of measurements, thinking about ergonomics and human form on like new vehicles and things like that. So that was somewhat obvious. And I think, having knowledge of all the different perspectives on the team, people with different backgrounds and skill sets can help answer that question if, say, like the research manager is not aware or doesn't know. That's one nice thing about having a very diverse set of skills on the team.
Great, thank you, great question. Another question over there, yes?
Hello. That was a great talk. Thank you. I loved what you said about 50% of your role, of the role of a researcher as being the research, and the other 50% being, what was it called? Like
Influencing.
Influencing. Yeah. So do you give any particular guidance on that latter 50%?
Yes. I mean, I think the biggest thing there is really about building relationships with the folks that you are working with. And so since we are working on an embedded model, it's much easier for the researchers to understand who they're supposed to be working with on a day-to-day basis. So I think the very first thing to do is make sure that you're in with that product manager and you're in with a set of designers, and building those relationships so that you are there at the meetings, you're being invited, and that your voice is heard.
Monal, thank you very much one more time, Monal, for that great talk.